good afternoon to every one of you, and thank you very much for the invitation, and I also thank you very much for the introduction. And I must first of all say congratulations for those of you who are involved with the Kerala section of being winning the best, the large section under the NJ award, and surely all the volunteers contribution towards the IEEE community, advancing technology for humanity are being recognized. I think you well deserve this. Well, this is not my first time speaking to some of the OU in Kerala section. I believe I've done it in one of the other colleges before. And for the topic tonight, actually, is one of the very popular topic. I have been giving webinars since the beginning of May. I counted, this is my 32nd since the beginning of May. And I have another 20 or so coming up in this month. So I expect by the end of this month or by August, I would have half a century of webinars being delivered. And I have a couple of topics, and this is one of it quite requested quite often. So I'm just hoping that this will be giving you some kind of suggestions. I wouldn't say that I'm able to guarantee you that I have 100% success in your grant and proposal application. But nevertheless, I'm hoping that you are able to have some pointers and also think from another aspect, or rather than just simply putting in the words. So you will see what I mean from here. So I thank you again for the invitations by Dr. Biju King, Assistant Professor, Head of Department for the Department of Electrical and Electronics Engineering, the Vice Chair of the Industrial Applications, IE and PELS Joint Chapters, Kerala College of Engineering, Amana, and County State, India. So I hope that the target audience for tonight, having the undergraduate and some postgraduate students, I look at the profiles of your university, of your college. I know that the majority of you are under the MTech and the BTech students. And on that aspect, I expect you have to write some form of research proposal. Well, I'll be speaking as from experience, as I have been the research director and also a postgraduate study coordinator. So some of the things that what the university may look for. In particular, if you're interested in applying for scholarship, then again, some of the additional parameters that the university may need to assess to give you a better chance of getting the scholarship. And then there are researchers and faculty members whereby you may have to write some kind of research grant proposals as well. Well, for grant proposal, actually, it's quite a broad topic because obviously, for different organizations, they have different requirements. So I will just pick on one example from IEEE New Initiatives Committee. Well, the reason I pick on that one because I have been on the committee for around 6 or 7 years now. Well, we have a monthly meeting, and we give out grants that range from under 40,000 to some of the bigger grants over $1 million or so. So I would say that the application form is a very good example to illustrate what are the typical sections and information they expect. So I just hope that you can take a look and learn from there. And also, I will also point out to you some, you can download some of those past application forms which has been successful. So again, there might be some IEEE members you are interested to apply for IEEE program. Now looking at the time that I did not really cover the other grants available, but I will mention it briefly. So again, I have to make a disclaimer that the presentation is based on the experience and opinions of myself and not entirely the opinions of IEEE. So the agenda today is I will quickly give you an introduction of myself. I see this is important because, as you come across, all the different people, you may have not met them before. So it is now important for you to do some kind of fact check and take a look at the background. In particular, if you are looking for collaborators, looking at some researchers, looking at what they have published before is very important so that you can learn a little bit more about the background. But this is in particular important for students applying for admission for PhD program. Well, you must bear in mind that you are going to work with a supervisor. Well, it will be very embarrassing for you that if you try to approach a supervisor without knowing what has the supervisor been doing in the past. So that's why I always encourage that the student, you really have to do your homework first before you approach someone you haven't met before. And then I'll try to answer the question why you need to work on the research and grant proposal. And in particular, I want to put your mindset to differentiate between writing a research paper and grant proposal. So what are the considerations you need to take into account? Well, you will see there's some differentiation in here between the research grants, research proposal, and research grants. Okay, so I'll try to explain that later on as well. Then, as I have mentioned already, that I'm using the new Initiatives Committee program as an example to illustrate what one of those typical grants forms look like. Then I just finalize it with a few words. So if you want to take a look at my past record and what have I done in the past, I would say that, well, my university, Murdoch University, well, has a good practice that all the staff, we have put up some form of a profile page. So you can take a look at my page by searching or Google Murdoch University, Lance Fung profile. And then you'll come across this page. You will see that I have some heading about me, what are the teaching areas, well, what are research areas, current project, etc. Obviously, I have retired 5 years ago already, so I'm no longer involved in any active teaching. Even researcher, I am eligible to do research, but not as a principal researcher because I'm no longer a full-time employee of the university. But still, well, you're able to see that I have some of the list of the engagement and past speaking assignment, and also some of my association, in particular with IEEE. And also, I will talk about the student I've supervised and also the papers I published. So where am I? I have taken a look at Google, and I know that you are somewhere on the east part of the Kerala state, and I understand it's on the hills, so I know it should be quite picturesque and very nice. And I'm also located on the west coast of Australia. So I have just spoken to Dr. Biju King earlier on that I have visited Kochi a few years ago, and I'm really impressed with the scenery by the riverside. And you got the big river, the fishing net, and also the dance is pretty amazing. Okay, so well, Western Australia, well, as you can see, it's more or less comprises of 1/3 of the overall areas of the state of Australia. But bear in mind that, well, we are really quite a big continent, but we only get around 2.4 million people, well, within this part, and around 2 million people or so, well, within the metropolitan area. Murdoch University is the second longest established university. Established in 1974, close around 50 years old now. And we have 4 universities in WA. The oldest one is University of Western Australia. And then we are the second oldest one, and followed by Curtin University and Edith University. We do have one private university, the Notre Dame University, affiliated with the Notre Dame University in USA. My personal background, I was born in Hong Kong, and I was trained as a radio officer in the telecommunication and electronics areas. Well, 72 to 74, and I spent 1 year in the UK, in Bristol, Brunel Technical College. And then I did my undergraduate, in University of Wales, Institute of Science and Technology. I graduated in 81, followed up by another 1.5 years or so in a master engineering degree. And I did my PhD in UWA by part-time, and I graduated in 1994. And I worked as a lecturer in Singapore Polytechnic for 6 years, and then I migrated to Perth in 1988, and I started working in Curtin University in 89, and I started working in Murdoch University in 2003, and I retired in 2015. And in the past, I have been Associate Dean of Research, a Research Director, and I also manage a research center as well. I think for the past few years, since my retirement, actually, I'm getting more involved with IEEE, and which I enjoy even more. And I'm the Region 10 Educational Activities Committee Chair, and I have been having communication with Kerala Section. You have been very active in doing the project and contributing for the education needs in your state. And other roles that I have been playing is the Conference Quality Committee and the Technical Program Integrity Committee. Well, this is the one that oversees the standard and the quality of the papers within Explore. And sometimes we have to make the hard decision that some of the proceeding, we have to reject them because of the quality issue. But there's another topic I can also talk about. I also mentioned about the new Initiatives Committee. This is the committee was formed around 20 years ago is directly under the board of directors in the IEEE. We have roughly around 1% of the IEEE turnover for our budget, which is around $3 million or so. And this is where we have supported a lot of the emerging technologies project. Again, I have another talk that talks about emerging technologies. And I also involved in the technical societies, mainly with the system man in cybernetics. Okay, I was the board of governors for 6 years as well. And within the local geographical units, I've involved in section chapters and chair of the Australian Council before as well. So coming back to my academic contribution, well, if you go into my university website, you'll be able to find out that they have listed 334 of my past paper. And as I have said, even though I have retired in 2015, but you can see the paper is going on, mainly because I have quite a number of these students. I'm still co-supervising with them, and then they still have their paper being published in the journals and the conferences. But my actual number of papers is more than 334, because a lot of the earlier papers, they were in the paper format and not stored in the electronic format. But this is the one I have mentioned that the student I've supervised, well, they have listed around 31 theses under the PhD and also the doctorate of IT. And well, all these theses are freely publicly accessible. You can download it, all the PDF file. And you will be able to see I cover quite a wide range of topics. Well, mainly I want to cater for the needs of the student. And also my students come from all different parts of the world. Australia, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore. I have a good number from Thailand and also from Middle East as well. I have even students from Iraq, Libya, etc. So again, you're more than welcome to take a look at the different topics that I've covered. And then on top of that, well, you can also take a look at the public information under Google Scholar. They have listed, well, the papers, they have citation and H-index. And I'm really pleased to say that, well, my paper with my late supervisor, simulated annealing based economic dispatch algorithm, actually is still one of the most cited papers. And even up to this year, well, we still receive citation on that particular paper. Well, on others like the ResearchGate and also IEEE Explore, they've collected 126 papers in there, and Scoopus and Publon as well. So what I'm trying to say is, well, if you are really looking for a supervisor or maybe looking for people you want to collaborate with, this will be one of the first things you should do. Do a bit of research on the background of someone you're interested in, okay? Don't just simply write to anyone and say, oh, can I be your student? Don't do that. Make sure you understand what is the researcher or the professor have been working on before. And also you need to match to your background, especially some of the projects you've done in the past. So when you're going to write a research proposal, then we have to ask the question why you want to write it. Then I have already said it. If you're an undergraduate student, or even if you're a master's student, if you're looking for the opportunity to continue your study while doing a PhD and applying for a scholarship, and that is the time that you need to write a good proposal so as to gain your admission. And more importantly, that you want to get a supervisor, have the confidence and trust in you that he or she is able to work with you for at least 3 to 4 years. And then for the research student, once you started, you have written the research proposal to gain admission, but you also need to write another one, which is called the candidature. I don't know what's the terminology in other university, but for us, we call it the confirmation of candidature. So that is a document that students are expected to come up after 6 months of full-time research. And that is the one more or less establish all the research plan for the subsequent time for the PhD study. So it also meet the requirements. And also I will mention another forms, which is not too common. Well, in some countries, I found out that actually they did not really involve with that. And even in a lot of people come from technical background, I'm not fully aware of that. It's called the human ethics approval. That is also another proposal. I will mention that later on. And then you might need to write a proposal to support of the research work, and that is sometimes the grants comes in. So come to the first one, I need to differentiate. Well, what is the difference between the research proposal and the research paper? So because you need to have to, mindset very careful that, because there are two different things altogether. So you do not really write a proposal just because you think that, well, you are supposed to propose a very earth-breaking project, so that's why you think you deserve to receive the funding. I can tell you that that is not necessarily, well, people fund you because, well, you think that you have a very brilliant project. Well, a lot of time you need to go back to the reason that why they want to give you the money or they don't give you. And also another thing you need to prepare is writing a grant proposal. The chances of success actually is lower, even much lower than getting a paper being accepted. Okay, I'm going to talk about that shortly. So let's take a look at the main difference. Well, apart from the difference I have said earlier on, well, is in terms of this acceptance rate and success rate. First of all, one is before and one is after. What does it mean by that? When you write a research proposal, you are proposing something you are going to do. You are asking for either permission to do the project, or maybe you're asking for support. This is where you ask for grant money, all those things. So in other words, well, the works haven't been done yet. On the other hand, when you write a research paper, you're supposed to disseminate, well, what you have found out, well, what you are going to share with the community. So that's why I call one is before and another one after. So this is in terms of the result. One is requesting the resources, another one is the resources already spent. What it means is, well, when you write a proposal, really you have the thing in, but you're asking for it so that allow you to do the job. On the other hand, when you write a paper, well, you already finish with the experiment, or maybe as much as possible, so just sharing the results. Another important difference is when you write a paper, your paper will be a public domain. They will be accessible, well, to the public. And now on the other hand, well, a grant application, well, this should be a private domain because, well, they should not be really made available, well, for public circulation. Although, well, in the next, I will show you some examples where you can find out some of the past examples. But nevertheless, there'll be quite major difference in here. What it means is, if you write a research paper, now a lot of time people consider the patent. If you have some brilliant idea, but if you write a paper, then more or less you have disclosed the information to the public, then the chances of having your protection of your patent and IP will be reduced. On the other hand, when you write a proposal, strictly speaking, well, there's no, because they're not for public circulation, so really you should have the protection of the year that still belong to you. So that's will come to the next one, to talk about limited access and public access. And also another thing I must also add is because writing the paper is public access. In other words, well, if there's anything wrong with that, in times to come, it will catch up, well, it may catch up with the author. Well, it happens in IEEE. That's why I mentioned that I'm sitting on the conference quality committee, that you will see sometime in Explore, you come across a particular paper, the title is very attractive, maybe it's something you want to look into. But when you look into Explore, you find out a notice saying that the paper has been retracted. The reason behind it is, well, we find out there's some problem with it. Because, well, if papers are having issues like plagiarism, or maybe even, well, we have dealt with the result, there's a possibility the paper could be withdrawn, and maybe even having bigger implication as that. Again, there's another topic I can talk about, so I'll leave it out in here. Another one is on the timing. When you write a research proposal, they're time critical. Mainly is referred to the deadline you need to submit. On the other hand, well, the paper, once being published, there's really no requirement. Of course, the submission time, you still have time. Say, for example, if you have a conference where you still have a deadline. If you have a journal, then if you are asked to do some review, then of course you still got some deadline. They give you a couple of weeks. You need to finalize it. But apart from that, well, once you put it in, and that's it. But in terms of the proposals, well, once you meet the deadline, well, the chances are you won't be considered anymore. Another important aspect is when you write a proposal, the track record is very important. In other words, well, don't feel bad because saying that, oh, your application for grant is being rejected. It may not necessarily correlate to your idea. You could have a very good idea. But then again, well, if you are not able to demonstrate you have the track record and the credential to convince that the committee that you are able to deliver it, that's why you are rejected. So that's why it's very important. On the other hand, when you're looking at the paper is really for your credential building. Because once you got the paper, they're with you forever. But of course, well, you still, well, you can still do your citation of some of your past work, but but the paper is not rejected because you haven't done enough work in that one. Well, what I'm trying to say is, well, you could have write a paper whereby you have not really written any paper on that before. Well, you can still get it accepted if it's a good paper. But on the other hand, if you write a grant application, especially if you're asking for substantial amount of money, if you're not able to demonstrate you have enough experience or past record that you have been able to deliver a large grant or manage a large grant, the chances is, well, the confidence of the committee in you will be much more reduced. Okay, then what are the considerations? So coming back to the research proposal itself, well, as you have seen, I've tried to differentiate the two parts. Well, one is on the academic type of research proposal, mainly for academic study, for admissions, for scholarship. And that one is for the grant, is relating to money. So I'm assuming the first case, looking for admission and scholarship. And then the one is once you started, well, after 6 months, you have to do the confirmation of candidature. And I also mentioned about human research ethics. So this one is not too often talked about. Then I'll quickly take a look at the structure of a research proposal. So I'm using my university as an example. So this is a part of the information on the website. So assuming that you want to apply for admission into a research degree, well, first of all, there's no timing. You don't need to match with the semester time. You come in anytime. Well, but if your work includes some kind of coursework, sometimes they may place some condition in that, and of course you have to align back to the semester time. But nevertheless, well, the few things we will look into. First of all, we will examine, well, the application. Is a student eligible, well, to be applied for admission? What it means is, well, not only just simply having an undergraduate degree, well, we do require it has to be a honor degree. What it means is we do expect the student have proven, well, quite a substantial amount of a research component, well, in the study. So in the context of Australia, a student do a 3 years for general degree, actually is not going to be admitted into a PhD program. But your student have to spend at least 1 more year, well, in what we call honor year. Then within the honor year, the student will have 1 whole semester working on a substantial dissertation. Then we consider is eligible. But of course, if you are doing an engineering degree, a 4 years degree, then as long as the project is substantial, then it will also be accepted. Then this is the one I talk about, the potential supervisor is very important. Because, well, it is not just because you got a good degree or you got a good result, then automatically the university will accept you. Although you stand a very good chance if you got a good GPA, but nevertheless, well, you need someone to work with you. Because having a PhD study is different from doing a normal coursework. A normal coursework for lecturers, you have 1 or 2 students extra sitting in the class, does not really make any difference. But for PhD, well, it's a major commitment, well, from the university and also from the supervisor. So we also place limitation on number of students that the supervisor can take on as well. Well, when I was involved with that, well, we have limitation of 5 students at the very most. But then again, because it's a 5 full-time, so if you're doing co-supervision, well, we might have more than that as well. Then you need to have expression of interest. Well, this is really a general form. Well, in our university, the process is, well, you put in an expression of interest form. This is not the proper application for admission. So this is only indication. Then, well, this will be circulated among the staff because you may say, oh, I haven't, well, met the staff before. The university, well, may circulate among the staff, and then, well, the staff may get in touch with you and discuss and negotiate what's the project you want to work on. And you need to be very clear to talk about your research proposal. This is the one I'm talking about. So when you're looking for your admission, this will be your very first research proposal you need to start on. So the first question is, how do I know the topic? Okay, so generally there are 2 approaches we can consider. One is, well, you come up with an idea. You have been reading quite a fair bit of information. You look at this as a reasonable project to work on. Well, it's quite common that this is the way we do it in some of the other disciplines. But sometimes you could be working with a supervisor, or he or she has already got a list of projects in hand, so they have carved out some of the individual tasks, so expect some of the postgrad students work with him or her for 3 years. So this is the time that maybe you can work from a list from the supervisor. But nevertheless, you still need to demonstrate you have sufficient background on this one. You don't really, I doubt the supervisor nowadays is willing to take on a student and then spend a lot of extra time to train the student from scratch. Because even though that you have a 3 or 4 years degree in the background, but not necessarily, well, you have the techniques or you have the skills on the project he or she is working on. But nevertheless, this is also quite common. So it means that it's also nothing wrong. Well, you can also ask the supervisor, well, or potential supervisor, well, what are the projects available? But then again, as I said, well, you make sure that you have done your background. Well, as a person, my personal experience is, well, sometimes when students just write to me and can I be your student? And then, well, what are you working on? Then, well, I will have big discount on the intention of the student. Because if you ask me to be a supervisor, you never find out, well, what am I working on? Then, well, what is your research scale that I'm asking? So you see, it's very important that you need to discuss about your ideas so that you can finalize, so you can advise the proposal as well. So how do you develop the research proposal? You need to read a lot of materials, okay? You need to really read the journals. Well, you may not be able to understand everything, but then again, well, you really have to start. You take a look at how they're being written, how the layout of the structures, and well, languages and writing will not be able to develop overnight. You really need some time. So that's why I said that when you start a program, you need 6 months to write a much more decent proposal. But for admission purpose, well, the length normally is much less. Okay, you will see the number later on. You can also be a bit flexible as well, because in times to come, well, you may find out during the study, you may have the direction a little bit. Make sure that you need to keep yourself updated, and also essential to always ongoing discussion with your supervisor. So this is the application form as an example, illustrate to you. So from Almeida University, if anyone applying for admission for scholarship, well, normally we put them as one form together. These are the graduate research degrees. Well, majority of them will be just simply under the PhD, or maybe under the MPhil. They're much more generic. Or maybe some student, they may not have the, well, honors degree, that sometimes we can put them in what we call a research master program or by training. And we also have a list of what we call the professional degrees as well, professional doctorate. In the context of Australia, well, we all consider them as what we call the level 10, which is the highest level on the academic, range from PhD, master, undergrad, diploma, high certificate, etc., etc. So there's others. So you will see some of my students, but they were under the doctorate of IT. So what it means is, the difference is, well, when we talk about the generic terms for PhD, we consider the holder of it as make a contribution to knowledge. And then when we talk about professional doctorate, we consider someone have make a contribution to the profession. Okay, I know it's really abstract, but we expect a similar really requirement in terms of the number of papers, and also the examiners, and also the length of the thesis, etc. Anyway, coming back to this. So obviously, when you put in an application form with your personal detail, they're pretty straightforward. And then, well, if you're coming to Australian university, well, one of the first things they look for will be the English requirement. So, well, either looking at TOEFL or the IELTS, okay? Sometimes they might have go through some other specific program as well. You might be acceptable. So what kind of program? Now, as you can see in here, there's one section talk about scholarship. Obviously, well, for students coming from overseas, well, I can assure you it's very expensive, well, paying the scholarship in Australia. But we do give out scholarship, and they are mainly from two sources. Well, one is from the Australian government. That is what we call the International Postgraduate Research Scholarship. And that one from our university itself, called Murdoch International Postgraduate Scholarship. Now, even though I'm using my university, but I can show you that most of the other Australian universities something similar. And most of them, even on top of that, well, you have these two sources. Sometimes they may have some other, variation of the program. Now, these two, mainly for these two programs, if you are a BTech or MTech student looking for PhD, if you're able to get it, I would say that congratulations, because they will cover your school fee plus your living expenses. And on top of that, well, Australia actually is quite generous. Well, we do allow students to have 20 hours of working under the visa condition. Unlike some other countries like UK and US, you're not allowed to work. So I would say that most of the students, well, they are quite happy in Australia. Well, even though that the living allowance may not be too good, too high, but then again, it's more than enough. But we also have some other derivatives or some other scholarship. Sometimes we have a scholarship, what we call is a fee waiver. So what it means is, well, the student does not need to pay the school fee, but there's no living allowances. But we don't really publicize too much on this because they may change every year according to the budget condition, maybe different school as well. So another one is, well, you'll see that actually I've skipped a couple of sections, but quite general section. So if you download the form, you can take a look at the section yourself. But I would like to highlight, well, this is the part. If someone wants to apply for scholarship, it is very important that the student need to demonstrate you have prior research experience. So even though that you are undergrad or MTech, I would strongly encourage you to take a look at opportunity whereby you can maybe publish some papers and also conduct some kind of research project with your supervisor or with your study. So these are the things we look for. So if you're able to demonstrate that some kind of journals have been published before, book chapters. Now sometimes, I would say that sometimes it's maybe unfair to the student just fresh from the university. Because, well, in the past, well, we do have some faculty members, but they also apply for the scholarship as well. And obviously they're much more stronger because they have this kind of a research experience. But nevertheless, it does not mean that you don't have the chance at all. Well, we still admit a lot of students coming in, but in particular, your GPA and the result will be very important as well. So now let's come back to the proposal now. So apart from those part you see about the research experience, you also see the professional bodies. Well, it'll be important. We see that IEEE obviously is one of it as well. Then you see the proposal. The proposal is, well, in here for admission, you only require 300 to 500 words as well. What is required in here? We expect you to give a summary of your research aims, or what are the likely research questions you're looking at, and also what are the possible outcomes. This is very important. Whatever proposal you're writing, how are you going to articulate the outcomes is important. Because you haven't done yet, but you need to be able to anticipate, well, what should be the result from your work. And you also explain why you want to do this particular research. And you will see this is the same thing applied to the other grant application. So assuming the student have been admitted into our university, then after 6 months, they need to go through what we call the confirmation of candidature. So as you can see in here, the research proposal is much more larger compared to the admission one. Now between 3,000 to 4,000 words, or maybe in some other discipline, they expect some kind of academic writing, maybe up to 6,000 words as well. But these are the main things you need to include in your proposal. Comprehensive overview of the rationale, why you want to do the work, and you need to explain it, the significance of it. That this is a bit of difference compared to writing a paper. Writing a paper, sometimes you make the assumption that the one who write it is already quite well interested in your discipline, that they know something about the research problem themselves. So the emphasis is really, well, you explain your methodology, you explain, well, what have you done in the results. But this one, for proposal, you haven't done yet. So it's more important that you need to know what are you doing, or why are you doing this research. So other things is the aims, methodology. Okay, you also need to know, explain what are you to do and the timeline. And of course, there's some other additional elements. This is maybe unique to our university, but quite similar in the other as well. Well, I mentioned about the human ethics research. So because in Australia, if anything, you deal with human beings, that we need to abide to the national statement, the code of conduct, ethical conduct in research. And this one is important because, well, there are legal implications if you're not following it. So we have Australian Code for the Responsible Conduct of Research. So what is human research? Human research is with anything dealing with people, with the data tissues involved through the survey, interview, focus group, psychology, well, physiological, medical testing, observation by researchers, personal document, collection of the body organs, the tissues, fluid, and access information as well. So obviously, in this day and age, well, we collect a lot of information, and especially in this big data era. So, but if you're dealing with human being, well, identify, you need to be very careful about the privacy issue. So because by doing this, is protecting the participants in the research, and also protecting about the researcher themselves, and also protecting the university. So this is an example. Now, why I highlight this one? This one is different from the research proposal and the candidature. Because in those two applications, you are expecting, well, maybe the supervisor, maybe there's someone, the head of school, or maybe some other professor or lecturer on the panel. So they have a certain expectation or understanding on the technical aspect already. But for the human research, this is quite different in the sense that the committee may not be entirely from your background. So you can see they do expect you to write a lay summary. In other words, well, you need to really write it, even though you're working on a very technical program. Say, for example, I want to measure the ECG, well, collect it from the brain wave of the participant so that I can analyze, well, what is the emotion. Now, this one definitely dealing with the human. Definitely, I need to go for the human research ethics approval. But then again, well, when I apply, well, for this one, I need to explain to this committee. And a lot of them, they are not from technical background. Well, when I was, well, in the university, I know the committee member consisting of people from other faculties and even people from outside. We even have people from the church. We have people from the community leaders, well, from from different racial background as well. So because they want to make sure that, well, there's no discrimination and all those things. So that's why it's very important, the lay summary. Now, why I say this, because when you apply for a grant application, you need to make the same assumption. You cannot make the assumption that the committee members will understand all the technical things. When you write it, you have to write in such a way it's targeting lay people. In other words, well, you need to explain clearly. You cannot make the assumption that understand everything on a technical aspect of what you're trying to do. So this is the main things, the message I want to bring forward. So you can see that again, the layout will be very similar. We've got the keywords, well, you might go through the peer review, well, the backgrounds, well, what's the project all about, and what is the aims and the justification. So all these, and also note that there are some limitation, well, maximum 200 words, maximum 1 page. This is again another things you need to pay attention to. Writing a paper, no doubt you have limitations. Say for example, conference paper, number of pages, 4 pages, 6 pages, 8 pages, 10 pages, whatever it is. A lot of time when you're writing these type of grant application, they may even limit the number of words within specific sections. You will see the same thing in the next application later on as well. Why? Because you must also look at, well, the time requirements from the committee member. They're not only looking at your application, they may be looking at tens, hundreds of applications as well. So you need to consider, well, the time they need to spend on yours. So you need to be very concise for whatever you're doing. So you can see some other things, talk about the potential, well, benefits, risk, and harms, who are the participants. So data management, I mentioned about privacy, all those things, and other ethical issues. So to me, well, this is, well, the ethics application is really very close to the grant application. Only thing it doesn't cover is on the budget, okay, which I will talk about when we look at the next application. Now, I have gone through the 3 type of, I consider maybe more academic type of research proposal, okay, admission, candidature, human ethics approval. Now let's take a look in terms of money, okay? So when you go for grant application, a lot of time that you want to deal with funds. So because they are just simply some kind of gift and then, well, some condition, mainly is a condition of the grants, well, what they're looking for. And the main thing is competitive. That's why I mentioned earlier on, well, the difficulty in here is, well, the acceptance rate or success rate, actually, you can be sure is lower than most of the paper admission. I also want to clarify, well, this one is different from the tender or contract. Well, being in academics, sometimes we're also involved with some consultancy work as well. So we might, well, just simply some people want to develop some work. But a lot of time, those type of work, they align with the money, they will also have some expectation or liability if you're not able to deliver it. And this is a bit different from the normal grant application. If you have a grant application, you've been approved it, at the worst case, well, if you do not really deliver, that really you have no legal liability at all. But if you're having a tender or contract, that is not the case. Well, they might be even built in the clauses within the tender. So you got to be careful. A lot of time, the tendering is referring to something to do with a project whereby you supply goods, perform a job, or maybe buying a business, typical examples. So don't mix up with the two. So we are not talking about anything, a tender in this context. So before you start, well, very important for you to understand, well, what is the organization and why they want to give out the money. And then you need to know who are the people reading it. So that's why I said that, well, consider the committee members, they are not really having technical background. So you need to write to address those expectations from them. You need to define the problem. Well, what are you trying to do? Well, what are you trying to solve the problem? What is the current state of the issues? Well, what other people have done about it? What is the proposed solution? And how you're going to work on that? Very important for you to explain, well, how do you see the impact and the effects of your project? So that when it is completed, you're hoping that, okay, you may bring, well, water, clean water to the village, you may bring electricity and light to the village, and then you may need also to specify, well, how many of these people were expected to be benefit from your project. You need to be realistic with a timeline, and also you need to spell out all the resources required. So these are the project information. I will very briefly. Now, I know the time is catching up because I realized, well, I'm going a little bit overboard. But nevertheless, well, these are the typical information you expect, well, inside the project. Okay, I will go more detail when we look at the forms. So obviously, the typical question, just like when you do a research work, why you want to do a project, what are you going to do, how are you going to do it? Well, this is related to the methodology. Who will be involved? Because the credential of your project members are important. Where are you going to do it? Okay, how long timeline? How much required, the resources? Really, all these are the basic questions, description on your project. Well, you need to clarify the problem, why you want to work on this, provide statistic and data on the current status, and you have to be concise. You must bear in mind that, well, the reader on the committee will have a lot of application on hand. You don't want them to get annoyed with your application. So you need to explain with detailed plans, what are the course of actions, and you need to demonstrate you have already done enough, well, background research. You don't really want people to come around and say that, well, why you want to work on this? I've already got existing solution. So what are the approach? What are the tasks, timeline, deliverables, and the metrics? Deliverables and metrics are two different things. Deliverables are the things you promise is going to be delivered. Say, for example, you want to deliver a website. You want to develop a particular system for bringing light in the rural areas. So those are the deliverables. Metric is how you measure your success of the deliverables. So in other words, when you have the website, so how effective it is, well, I have some kind of measurement, how many visits, how many clicks, how many hit rate. If I'm having the likes, then I can say that, well, okay, how many residents, how many houses is going to be installed with the light. So those are the metrics of success. Another one you need to consider is what are the risks involved as well. You need to anticipate what are the possible problems you might have. So you need to explain what are the course of action that you are going to take care of those issues. Of course, we may not be able to understand, to anticipate all the possible things, and whatever can go wrong. But nevertheless, you need to demonstrate, you have thought about those problems. You might also come up with the plan as well. So what are the list of risks and what are the action you will take? Budget is very important. A lot of time the budget can be the break or make, because you could have an excellent project, you could have a description, the need is there, but the budget a lot of times that if it is considered is unrealistic, too little. Well, sometimes don't think that because you're asking for too little money, then you'll get it. Well, people will not. Just because you ask for less money, they give you the grant. You need to have the appropriate budget. That is a key word. All right. And also sometimes you might be able to demonstrate how you look for additional sources of the income as well. It's important to give someone a commentary, justify why you want to spend that money. Say, for example, a good example is travel. Because as the committee on the members, sometimes we got wearied that we do not really want a lot of money going to travel, going to holding meetings, and then spending money on hiring the venue, catering, all those kind of things. Because as far as budget is concerned, we consider those money, once it's being spent, it's really, there's no return. But you may justify that I need to run those meetings so that, we need to put the people together to discuss the idea. So that is the outcome, okay? So emphasize on the outcome. You need to give the financial statement. You may need to consider the tax. In particular, some of the countries, they might have additional services tax as well. And then I mentioned about additional funding sources. If you're able to demonstrate your project, also secure additional support from other sources, it will give you much more plus marks. So you also make sure read the policy on the items they do not fund. So the worst thing can happen to you is you ask for a lot of money for items you may be even important for your project, but if they have already listed, they are not going to fund those kind of things, then you need to justify, either why you want more than one or how they're going to be funded alternatively. I have already mentioned about metrics and deliverables. They must be clearly defined. And also how you measure your success, and in particular impact. Now this impact is an important word. So in terms of the bringing lights to the community, then you can argue that, okay, how many houses is going to be benefit from it? But on top of that, you can argue that, well, with this one, that people can go into maybe the cottage or industry, then they can have additional income. So that will be additional impact, not just bringing light to them. So if it is a long project, you need to highlight the progress and the milestones. Sustainability is also very important parameters. From the funding body point of view, note that we are putting in as I said, actually we have money going to hundreds or even $1 million a project. But the last thing we want to see is this money put to the project, come to the end of 3 years, that's it. You never heard about this again. We don't want that at all. We want to see, we always ask the question, how the project is going to be sustained after the completion of the grant. So we need to see how it's going to thought through it right at the beginning. So you need to ask, you need to justify, are you able to secure additional revenue, and also that maybe another body to take care of it. So any other additional information is very important about the references and also the past record. I mentioned about the word credential, because you need to give the decision maker the confidence that you are able to deliver. So now we're using an example from NIC, New Initiatives Program. This is already available on the internet under the IEEE NIC site. And as I said, I have the pleasure, I have the honor and the pleasure to be the chair last year, and currently I'm serving as a past chair on the committee. So if you take a look at all these terminologies, smart grid, ILN, which is just celebrate 1 year anniversary, tri-engineering, all these have been funded by NIC. So this is the commonalities between them. Well, if you're interested in this, I strongly recommend you take a look at the NIC website. Just simply search a New Initiatives Committee, IEEE, you'll come to this website. And then they'll explain all the information behind it. Well, what we are looking for is the money, is try to do the new program, service, or product. Now, bear in mind, this is not research grant, okay? So we are not funding fundamental research. So we are not, recently somebody asked me, okay, I'm looking for $30,000 because I want to conduct a survey on a certain type of disease. Then I say, no, it's not really for NIC, because we need it to benefit the IEEE community. And this is really, what they proposed to me is, to us, is really quite narrow. So, and also it must be of strategic importance. So this is where you need to align with the strategic plan of IEEE. Right now, we are in the 2020 to 2025. We got a new plan coming up. We do not support any ongoing necessity. Recently, there was also seen another application asking for some money buying the projectors and the computer within the school. Then again, we will reject it because, it is not really for us to funding just simply normal teaching. But then again, if the application has been drafted in such a way that, you want to benefit the IEEE community, the projectors and the TV is only the tools. But the end result is really you want to promote IEEE doing our training and all those things. There will be a different aspect of it. So this is very important, how you're going to put forward the importance and the significance. So I've already mentioned that they are not classified initiatives. So the background of NIC has been around for close to 20 years now. So we expect to do some new things. So that's why you see a lot of those terminologies, of those initiatives, has been started. Smart grid is a good example. Now we talk about IoT, we talk about rebooting computing, ILN. Some of those, we see that is bringing a long-term impact to IEEE and also to the community. So mainly this is under the board of directors. So we need to be consistent with the IEEE visions and mission and the strategic plan. So if anyone is interested in this one, we do have our ongoing, meetings, a monthly meeting, and then, you do not really need to meet any deadline. well, any submission come in, well, we expect to give the result within 45 days or so. So only thing is sometimes we might have to roll over 2 years. And then in that case, well, that will be considered as a 2 years. But for small project, well, within 12 months. So then I can show you these examples when I'm looking at the forms. So there are 3 types of forms. One is a small grant, which is 40,000 and below, well, 12 months duration. Another one is a preliminary proposal. Now, for anything above 40,000, as I said, it can go up to over $1 million or so, and multi-years, that will be a new proposal, a new initiative. Those one is a 2-stage procedure. You need to give us, first of all, a preliminary proposal. I will show you very briefly all these forms shortly. And then, well, if the committee consider your proposal is worth consider, then we'll invite you come in with a full proposal. If the full proposal is received the green light and endorsement, then the request will go to the board of directors, and then board director will make the final decision. Well, although most of the time they will just go through it, but I think in the past, well, they have turned down one. The reason is because of the budget issue, not because of the validity of the project. But if it is a seed grant, I would say it's a very good alternative. You're looking for under 40,000, you'll be entirely decided by the committee. If it's a good project, we'll submit, well, we will endorse it straight away, well, you can get the approval and the money. So let's take a look very quickly, and I use this as an example. Now, I know that I'm already coming up to my time limit, so I hope that they'll give me around 10 to 15 minutes, and I hope it's quite all right. Then I just want to go through this, and then I can take some questions at the end. So I'm using these forms as an example to illustrate to you what are the elements within a typical grant application. So you see that the basic thing is, well, who are the one proposing it? Now, only things for NIC is slightly different is, well, we do expect an IEEE staff member to be involved. This, of course, well, for the due diligence and they can oversee, well, how the money is being spent properly. A lot of times, some of the NIC project comes in, they haven't got any staff people. So normally, we will not turn it down because of this, but we will encourage you that you really need to approach, well, the staff member as well. Say, for example, in India, you do have an India office. Harish, well, Mysore, well, he is the staff officer. He will be eligible, well, to be it. And also maybe within the other board, well, like EAB, Education Activities Board, and then your MGA, well, the staff member in there. So you have to approach them, and then if it's not successful, let us know, and then we'll try to help you out as well, if it's a good project. Then you need to write in. As you can see in here, all these will be listed down the similar section you have expected. Abstract. Now, I highlight the requirement is the number of words, as you can see in here, only 100 words. And then what's so new about it? You need to articulate, explain what's so new about it, 100 words. What is strategically important? How does it align with IEEE? So you really need to examine what are the strategic goals of IEEE and see how you match your project to it. What is the exact proposal? 600 words for it. You need to give a description, statement of the work to be undertaken, and also the objectives. And what are the outcomes, impact, and metrics? Okay, 200 words as well. What are the outcomes you expect? And in particular, you need to explain how does it provide an impact to IEEE. So the deliverables. So again, all the basic components are there. Okay, describe the project, how you're gonna do it. And then you give the expenses in here, okay? Under 40,000 USD. It's quite a substantial amount of money. I would say that it is, well, one of the good size, well, project grants, well, from IEEE. And then, well, how you spread it out, well, sometimes you may be depending, very unlikely, your project starting at the beginning of the year. So maybe in the mid of the year, so maybe half here, half here. And then you need to provide any additional information. So as you can see, the seed grant actually is not that difficult. But the challenge is how are you going to map, well, your proposal to the requirements and also the objectives of the grant. Then you go to the next one, the new initiative preliminary proposal. Again, you got all the basic information. Who are the proposers? Who are the staff members, etc. Again, take a look at the description itself. Because it is very likely you have a much bigger amount of grants. So this we expect give you more room to expand on this one. 200 words for the summary of the proposal. Again, also new and innovative about it. How does it align with the IEEE strategic goal? Now you can see in here, even highlight for you, well, what are the strategic goals within IEEE. You can take a look at IEEE website and find out the information. And also, well, what are the other OU working with? Okay, because well, we would also encourage the collaboration between IEEE, because we also see that if it's a big project, you need it to benefit multiple community as well. Also, what are the outcome, impact, and metrics? Okay, again, you see the same things. What are the outcomes, potential impacts on IEEE, and what are the metrics you're going to use? So this is the expectation. Now note that, well, you have included another item called the revenue. Because if you remember, I mentioned earlier on, one of the parameters we're looking at is how sustainable is the project. So IEEE will look at, well, this one is, are you able to bring in money from the initiative so that it can make it sustainable? Now bear in mind, IEEE is not asking for money. So because even if you bring in money, IEEE NIC does not ask you to return the money back to it. We are not profit sharing. We're not doing that at all. But we're just hoping that you're able to come up with the revenue sources to make your project sustainable so it can bring a long-lasting impact. So that's the reason why they have this one. So you need to work out all those potential costs in here. Now, again, I'm not saying that without the revenue, you're not going to get it successful. No, I'm not saying that at all. In the past, we have that. But if that is the case, well, you need to identify, well, any particular IEEE OU organizational unit will take over the project after that. So say, for example, ILN, IEEE Learning Network, now is officially housed in EAB, Educational Activities Board. So we fund over $1 million on that project. So this is important. Now, of course, ILN, well, they have revenue because they charge you for all the cost material. So this is why you talk about the sustainability. Then who is the champion? Well, really, who is the leader of this project? So when this proposal will come to the committee, well, we have our initial assessment, we have a discussion, and then we decide, work on it, should we go ahead, support it? Now, there could be another situation that, well, we may say that, okay, the application at this moment of time, well, it's good, we just go ahead, invite for the full proposal, or maybe we turn it down. But we may sometimes have another alternative is, well, we ask the proposer to work with a consultant. Well, actually, NIC even give out the money. They work with a consultant to help you to work on a business plan. So this also happens. So anyway, if you come to full proposal, this is what you have. So we'll ask you to give us the proposal. Now, this is the form that you expect to see. One of the first things you note is, well, there's no longer any limitation of words on here now. You really want to expect to see very comprehensive explanation how all these projects will come about, executive summary, and also how should we better off, what are the deliverables, what are the outcomes, and also, well, how are you going to measure the success as well? And also, well, you need to justify what are the advantages and the benefits, and also, well, who are the others, OU working with you? Okay, well, any other alternatives for the project you may consider? What are the resources? And also the people requirements. So as you can see, well, this particular form is very comprehensive. So I mentioned about the risk before as well. And we even consider the knockout. Well, in the worst scenario, well, what could be the situation that this could be taken out the projects completely? Okay, and then you look into other scheduled projects that may even cause a delay and all these things. And also any development, well, external customer. Okay, coming to the budget. As you can see now, the budget is really comprehensive now. Well, early on in the seed round, well, we leave it to you to identify the items. But in this one, it's very specific. We're talking about, well, give you some suggestion, okay? Well, how the money is being spent. If you need to have consultants, research, survey, equipment, workshop, meeting, communication, travels, even for the volunteers, for the staff, and also trainings, promotion, publicity, startup, okay? So it's quite a fair amount of items, very detailed. And also looking into yearly basis, okay? Well, what is the financial breakdown because a multi-years project? And also in particular, the sustainability, we ask you, what is a post-life cycle estimate? So once the money is finished, now how are you going to fund it after the IEEE funding has finished 1, 2, and 3 years, etc. And then what are the milestones? Okay, you need to explain. In addition, when any success project, you need to give a regular quarter report to the NIC committee as well. Any additional information. So as you can see, so these are the examples. I did not really teach you how to write a proposal, but I can use this one as an example to illustrate what are you expected to supply. So then you may ask me the next question. Any particular indication the project have been approved in the past? As you can see some of these in here now. Earlier career, the faculty development, 2013, 40,000, the NIC grant, academic, and around $180,000. And then you see that the public policy, Internet of Things. Okay, as you can see, right now is one of the hot topics, Internet of Things. So we have funded it even as early as 6 years ago. We funded 1.36 million. Smart cities, e-government, big data, again, another hot topic now. Well, we funded close to $1 million on that. Cybersecurity, another one, close to $700,000. ICT green technologies, well, 800,000. Well, ION, this is the one I mentioned. This is expected to be one of the flagship program from IEEE. It's a consolidation of all the training programs across IEEE. Rebooting computing, environmental engineering. This one is only a part to support the other bigger project. And enhancement, history, timeline, etc. They may ask me another question. Can we see some full application? The answer, yes, we also have it. You can go to the website, go to this link, examples of successful NIC proposals. Well, this will be a better description. You can look into what other people have written down early on. So we have a list of some of those successful seed grant, not everyone, but we just highlight some of these. Okay, open source, 2030 in the classroom. So if you download the PDF file, click on the link, this is what you'll see. Okay, you can download the whole proposal. So I do not really intend to spend time to show it, but I leave it to you to look at it yourself. So when we look in Australia now, okay, actually in Australia government, so I would expect you have something similar. We also have something similar called the Australian Research Council. This is our main research funding body within Australia. We give out around $800 million or so a year. So there are two types of programs, a linkage program, which have been go with the industry. Another one is called discovery grant. And some of these, they might just go to the salary, well, of the researchers, okay? Now, I'm not going through all those programs because I know they're not relevant. But what I want to highlight is this part. Well, under the website, of course, well, you can go to the portal. You can see this, what they call the National Competitive Grant Program. This is a collection of all those. You can search for all those grants. But I want to highlight is two elements whereby government research grants are looking at, not just your proposal itself. They're looking at the credential of the researchers and the organization. In Australia, we call them the ERA, Excellence Research for Australia. This is really an assessment of the organization. They do not assess the researcher, but they assess the organization, how the performance over the years. This one has been in place for the past 10 years or so. So what they're trying to look at is, well, they will give an assessment of the organization, maybe a department of a research group, where they are compared to the world standard. So we have 5 standards. Well, 5 is a leading top world standard, 4 is a above average world standard, 3 is a world standard, and then 2 is below world standard. Obviously, this will give a lot of weight, well, to the decision makers. And just recently, they have another one coming up now called the engagement and impact. Now, why I'm saying this, I know that, well, you are in India, you may not be in really direct contact with us, but I'm not surprised the government are learning from one another as well. So what it means is the research grant application is no longer just how you write it, but really your credential and your background and how your previous work become very important. This is the one that only come up this year. I think the last report came out in 2018. So people need to have additional assessment on that. So I'm not going to say too further on that part. I'll just finish off by looking at some of the common errors people have done. First of all, they do not match the funding purpose. So they have not really examined why people give out the money in the first place. They didn't follow the guideline, especially looking at number of words and all those issues. the scope and deliverables are not feasible, okay? So don't just think that you can, well, make a lot of promise. Well, people, well, the decision maker, they have experience. They know that what can be done cannot be done. Some other careless mistake. Unfortunately, even though that, well, you are not entering the English examination, but if you have those kind of errors, you will give a very bad impression on your application, because people consider, well, if you are so careless with your application, how careless you could be when you conduct your research. And other similar issues like the missing pages, the diagrams. So that is quite important as well. And also quite confusing focus. Well, how you articulate, well, the aims and your objectives of your research is very important. And also try to avoid too much technical jargon. And also, well, the resources and the timeline and the money, well, don't overinflate it, or maybe don't underestimate it as well. And also, you're not able to articulate the significance of your work. And make sure you prove it over and over again, and other people. Make sure you check your proposal complete. Excuse me. Follow the format. It's quite similar to when you write a paper, you need to follow the instructions. Make sure it's readable, clear, and concise. But as I have said, you put the readers, well, put yourself in the shoes of the reader. Need the deadlines obvious. Well, don't do a last-minute job, but don't try to squeeze too much words. Don't give unrealistic deliverables. Well, make sure that the time schedule is feasible. Well, don't ignore the instruction. And in particular, talking about budget itself, make sure you read it, understand what they fund, what they do not fund. If you're able to have cite some sources, make sure those sources are available, okay? So don't just simply cite some internal report of a department. Well, what's the point telling people your references of internal report? Don't make sure that you just don't inflate, well, make very shallow claims. And also you miss the lessons from before. So in summary, okay, I'm reading the wind up now. So ability to write effective research and grant proposal is an important skill for students, faculty members, and researchers. So for students, it may relate to admission, it may relate to are you getting a scholarship or not. Faculty members, and also if you're asking for grant, it really relate to your success of your application. You really need to understand clearly what you want to do, okay, and what is the aim you try to achieve. And then it's important to know the purpose of the grant in particular, if the money is involved, and also bear in mind the success rate is not necessarily very high. Follow the instruction very carefully. And there are a lot of other sources. I only use NICS as only one example. I can name some others, like the site is one example. I believe Kerala, you would have something like that. Or they give around between $1,000 to $10,000 or $20,000. The other major source actually is IEEE Foundation. They also have a couple of other sources as well. And also within the region, we also have a lot of smaller amount of grants, some competition going on. But also there's another one, in particular for the student branches and for students, that would be a very good starting point to build your credential. And also you have to keep trying, you're gonna learn from it. Okay, so that's about it. I'm really sorry that I have over, the time for around 15 minutes or so. So I thank you again, and I wish you all success with your research and your grant application.